So I grew up on a small farm in West Virginia. We did cow-calf operation. My brother and I raised sheep for 4-H projects. We had about 30 head of sheep and about 20 head of cattle, and then another 20 calves. We grew up, like a typical rural West Virginia family where, we gardened and most of everything we ate came from the garden, did a lot of canning and that stuff. And I say all that because I went into agriculture in college, but I went into horticulture. I met Professor Sharrock at West Virginia University, who had just recently started the Central Appalachian Fibershed and was really into this farm to fashion aspect. And it just made a lot of sense to me. It was all about, everything I grew up with. The sheep turning wool into, clothing, growing crops for natural dyes. It was like this light bulb kind of just went off in my mind, and it was everything I wanted to do. It had this design element, but it also had this science and agricultural element. There's a couple of profound moments where I can look back and say oh, this makes sense of where I'm at now. I remember being a kid and taking naps in the barn on top of the giant bags of wool. So wool has just always been a big part of my life. Luckily my life has led me to working for a R1 land grant university like West Virginia University, where the mission is not so much about making money, but it is about making sure that the farmers are more profitable. Because as a kid, I was always taught that farming's a gamble, and basically all you can do in farming is increase your odds. And that's what I've been trying to do with all of my research, is increasing farmers' odds to being successful. We raised in our garden all heirloom variety tomatoes, heirloom beans, everything was heirloom. Then I went off and got a degree and really started to appreciate even more of what an heirloom seed actually means. They mean a lot to the individual who grows and uses them, but they also mean so much more to the overall community. And that's what I really love about this Acadian brown cotton. Being in West Virginia, I've never heard of such a thing. But being in contact with the Acadiana Fibershed, I've gotten to learn, how much this cotton means to the people there. And from a horticultural standpoint and a fiber standpoint, I just love that. Over the past year, the Central Appalachian Fibershed has been working on open source fiber processing equipment. The reason being is that our fiber farmers in the Central Appalachian area, there's no big mills in this area, so they're having to ship their fiber out for processing, so they're having to incur the shipping costs on top of the milling cost. And a lot of our farmers just don't raise enough fiber to justify sending it to the mill every year, so they're having to stockpile it, missing out on return on investment at an annual rate. In 2022, a friend of mine now, Rosie Bristro, was giving a presentation through Fibershed during the Bast Fiber meetings about the Studio Hilo open source spinner. I'd come across it before, but I hadn't actually seen anybody utilize it to actually verify if it was something that could be of benefit to the Central Appalachian Fibershed. After that meeting, I immediately got in touch with Rosie and her partner Nick, and we started collaborating on figuring out what the next steps of this are. So using microgrant funds from last year, we bought the equipment necessary to build out a Studio Hilo spinner. We realized that there was a few tweaks that needed to be made to make sure that it produced a consistent type of yarn and that it was user-friendly for our small farmers. Members of the Acadiana Fibershed and I met through a Fibershed working group meeting, and they approached us because they were having the same issues with milling their cotton as we were having with milling our wool. And they wanted to know if the equipment we were working on would be capable of helping them out as well. So they sent us up some samples. We got it in the machine and started playing with it. And unfortunately, the machine could spin cotton. It just couldn't spin cotton at the consistency and the quality that this beautiful cotton deserves. So moving forward, what we need to do is make more modifications on this machine to be able to handle both, really good wool and also this very short staple length that the Acadian cotton has. So hopefully moving forward, we can create this spinning machine that allows the farmers who are raising this beautiful heirloom cotton to be able to process it on site and, really help these farmers out on their bottom line. Between the carding machine and the spinner both, we've gotten that down to where it only costs the small farmer $5,000. But that's still $5,000 that the small farmer has to incur to be more profitable. And what we really want to see is as many of these machines as possible in the hands of the small farmers within the Appalachian Fibershed to make them as profitable and as successful as possible. But we can't do it alone. We do need some help to make these dreams a reality.